So apparently there are two clips from this longer video. Let's just watch the clips for now because I don't know. Maybe we'll watch a full Candace video at some point. Apparently there are two clips of her doing more Nazi shit. Candace Owens has been doing this for a while though. People say this is new. I don't think it's new. I feel like I've been seeing her drop these little nuggets at anti-Semites for a really long time. But let's start with this one.
In this case is Germany, Nazi, Hitler, the greatest evil that's ever happened on earth, even though factually and statistically it is not. And part of that learning process for me when I started looking into it was coming across a huge fact that we ethnically, the Allies, ethnically cleansed 12 million Germans. Because when you say to people, okay, what is it about Hitler? Why is he the most evil? Well, the first thing people would say is, well, an ethnic cleansing almost took place. And now I offer back, you mean like we actually did in this case?
She's really mixing up her terminology there. That is very, very fucking stupid. So the ethnic cleansing she's talking about, first of all, the genocide is not ethnic cleansing. So the Holocaust is not called an ethnic cleansing. It's called a genocide because they murdered people. The 12 million she's talking about are not people who were murdered. She's talking about 12 million people. That number, I think, refers to the number of Germans who were lived in the Sudetenland area and in Poland and elsewhere, like settling on the eastern side of Germany, like countries to the east of Germany, and were forced to flee to Germany as the Soviets were pushing back. She's wrong on multiple fronts, though. First of all, it's more than 12 million. She's not talking about the number of Germans who were killed in the war. That would be 8 million. There's no way she's mixed those numbers up. Germans deported Eastern Europe. Yeah, it was about 12 million. Yeah. But even this is not entirely accurate to say that we ethnically cleansed this many Germans. Of these 12 million people who were forced from Eastern Europe into Germany, it went in waves. So in the first wave of people moving, that was when people were fleeing as the Soviets were advancing to take the territory. It was people fleeing. The second phase was evacuations by the Nazis. No, I got those phases back to front. The first phase was the evacuation by the Nazis because the Red Army was advancing and the Nazi government decided to pull people back to Germany, like they're civilians. And the second phase was when people were fleeing after the Wehrmacht surrendered. And then the third phase was the organized expulsion. This organized expulsion, I'm pretty sure, amounted to maybe 1 million, maybe 2. I don't think it was any more than that. The rest was all like either the Nazis doing it themselves or people just fleeing as the Red Army advanced. Now, again, if you want to call this out, the decision by the Allies to organize an expulsion of that last group, you can argue that was unethical. Definitely, no one disagrees that the way they did it was very unethical. There are some people, more like left-leaning social democrats and people who will have like this argument, even socialists and communists believe this as well. They believe that the rationale for not wanting ethnic Germans to stay en masse, especially in areas like the Sudetenland, was the fear that their presence, even though some of them had been there for quite a while, long before the Nazis, the fear was that their presence could risk destabilization in the future. Because the whole reason for Germany annexing Austria and then the Sudetenland and then tearing through Czechoslovakia and then eventually Poland was because of the presence of ethnic Germans in those areas. They used their presence. They used the fact that those ethnic Germans were often slightly mistreated by those governments. They would exaggerate the absolute fuck out of it and lie about it as well, similar to how Putin justifies his move into Ukraine. And the fear was that no one knew what post-war Germany would become, what it would be. And the fear was that a post-war Germany might emerge into a once again colonial entity, like a conquering nation that would want to use the existence of ethnic Germans in the Sudetenland to try again. That was the fear. Now, does that justify deporting people for just their ethnicity to Germany? I don't think so. Not necessarily. Definitely doesn't justify the way they did it, because the way they did it was quite brutal. A lot of people died on the walk. A lot of people were killed for saying no, they didn't want to leave. But you can have an argument there. It's slightly more nuanced than murdering 6 million Jews, Candace. It's a slightly more nuanced discussion in terms of the scale of the harm, for the reasons that they did it, for the reasons that people might justify it, in terms of just numbers, because the 12 million thing is just bullshit. Like, if you really count people evacuating their own civilians after a counterattack from the country they invaded, the Soviet Union, like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's also not as if the Nazis didn't commit ethnic cleansings as well, by the way. The Nazis also pushed people out of their countries and out of their homes, made people flee for their lives because people realized that they were not actually that safe when they stayed under Nazi rule. Can you imagine why? Not least of all Jews. You also seem to remember that Germany was the aggressor state. Yeah. And those German settlers they were insanely right wing. And the problem there was that when you've got a bunch of very fragile nations, plenty post-war nations, the problem is having a very substantial population that has absolutely no loyalty to your state. If you're going to compare this to Nazi actions, though, leave aside the Holocaust, which the Allies didn't do any equivalent of, not even the Soviets. Leave aside that. What about the hunger plan? This is another thing that people just don't seem to speak about as much. But this was a plan, an actual policy, not even comparable to the Holodomor in that sense. It was actually a plan, an expectation, and a general order from the Nazis to starve out the Slavs. Because the whole idea was that they believed, and this is part of the benefit that they had of having German settlers around here, they wanted to starve out the Slavic population, to make space, living space, Lebensraum, for the German Volk to live here. Because they were pursuing this very idyllic rural lifestyle where everyone's got massive space to build up their country farmland, whatever. Obviously, they wanted a lot more land than they needed to do that, but yeah. But yeah, this idea, the General Plan Ost, which is, General Plan for the East, was this idea that they wanted to deliberately starve out the Slavs to the point that there were percentages of different populations, particularly in the Baltics, that they expected to die. And in one country, it was Volk is pronounced like folk. Sorry, okay, cool. I'm just saying Volk because it makes me sound more ethnic. Fuck you. Yeah, this was the idea. Percentage of ethnic groups to be removed from future settlement areas. So whether this was by starvation or just by moving them, yeah, they wanted almost 50% of Estonians, 50% of Latvians, 85% of Lithuanians, 70%. Yeah, this was actually expectations that they had of ethnic cleansing the populations to make room for Germans. So that's pretty full on. And this wasn't because of any political reasoning or because of people fleeing an advancing army on a counterattack. This isn't to do with the risk that these populations had to political stability in the future and their presence in these regions being used to justify wars and annexations and pillaging and shit like that. No, this was because they thought Slavs were subhuman and didn't deserve to live in the German Lebensraum. So, gosh. The expulsions were not about German settlers. They were about territories of Germany that were given to Poland and Soviet Union. But who lived in those territories? What a strange sentence. Anyway, apparently this isn't even the only one from that. Oh God, this one is batshit as well. I wonder, let's see.
Candace, come on, that's the difference. They experimented on twins. I mean, some of the stories, by the way, sound completely absurd. I'm the idea that they just cut a human up and then sewed them back together. Why would you do that? Literally, even if you're the most evil person in the world, that's a tremendous waste of time and supplies. Just slice a person in half and sew them together. That just sounds like bizarre propaganda. Innocent.
It's so fucking stupid. Who watches this shit? Well, I know who. Nazis. This is what Nazis like to hear. Can you imagine saying this about any well-documented serial killer? They killed people and then played with their corpses. What a waste of time, bro. Imperial Japan. The twin studies, the twin studies were absolutely real. Here's a good bit of insight about Holocaust denial if you want to know how it works. This is probably one of the most common tactics that they used. The twin studies, first of all, were absolutely real. Joseph Mengele was very interested in twins because obviously you can put two twins in different conditions, blah, blah. He was actually not a very disciplined researcher. A lot of his notes, and in terms of insights, you didn't even get anything from them because his notes were incredibly disorganized and lazy. So he was really just mostly doing it for fun. He injected people in the eyeballs to try and change the color of their eyes. He often blinded people. It is true that he kept eyeballs on the walls of his office. It's true that he experimented on twins. It's true that he conducted invasive surgeries and things like that on them without any anesthetic. Yeah, he was a fucking psycho. Yeah. I think, did he not escape to South America? Yeah, he died in Brazil in the 70s. Yeah. But yeah, we know about Mengele's experiments because he wrote about them. He wrote them in his journal. And also survivors have plenty to say about them as well. He died in a pool in a hotel. Huh. Yeah, apparently he would pin the eyes to the walls like little butterflies. Yeah. I think he experimented with dwarves as well. I think there's maybe, was he the one that forced a dwarf and someone else and a Roma traveler to have sex? Was that him? With twins, I think he injected their hearts with chloroform. Apparently, the cutting people up and sewing them, apparently that is because of a story about him taking conjoined twins. No, not conjoined twins. Like trying to sew twins together to make them conjoined. I think that maybe that's what she's talking about with cutting someone up and sewing them back together. But again, if that sounds mental to you, if that sounds like something a human being would never do, even though human beings commit atrocities all the time. For example, if someone told her that an Israeli did this, she would be absolutely throating that shit. She would be fucking guzzling that shit and spraying it out of her fucking asshole and then eating it again, rinse and repeat all fucking day. She would oh God, she'd be so happy if she heard that story. But let's say that, or we don't even need to say, there are some stories about the Holocaust that I think are not, that are either not reliable or are exaggerated or like embellished. Like, I think, for example, one, the whole idea of, again, I'm going from memory here. I think the story about turning people into lampshades and like making a business out of it. I think the business policy side of that thing is not true. I think there might have been one person who did that to a few people, but that's one of those stories that, depending on who you hear it from, it might be exaggerated. It might be like, oh, there was like a Nazi thing where they like had a market for lampshades made out of people. I don't think that was ever like a widespread thing. It might have been just like a couple of people or one person at a particular area. It was an isolated thing. Yeah. Soap. Yeah, I think soap as well. But I don't know. You can find out yourselves. I don't know if it was how widespread that was. But there's a thing. This is like a hallmark of Holocaust denial. Is what they will do is they will take stories that are less reliable, less well documented, and draw attention to them in order to draw attention away from the things that are not contentious, to try and make the whole thing sound unreliable. Which, again, is just like, it's so different from how actual researchers talk about the subject. For example, 40 beheaded babies. That spread pretty quickly in the first few days of the war with Israel and Hamas. But nowadays, the only people I hear talking about 40 beheaded babies are people who are anti-Israel. Because it's their way of saying that, like, it's their way of drawing attention to the things that we shouldn't trust that come. Because again, the Israeli government never pushed a narrative about 40 beheaded babies. Even the original news item that became 40 beheaded babies doesn't say 40 beheaded babies. It doesn't. You can watch the video, is it from the French journalist or whatever? Yeah, from the person who's at the kibbutz saying that she spoke to some soldiers, and I think one soldier mentioned people beheaded and that maybe 40 babies were killed. Turns out actually the number of kids who were killed was between 35 and 40-ish people who were under 18. That's it, yeah. But people nowadays, the only people who use it to sow doubt over all of October 7th. That's the idea. That's the point. It's the same thing with what Candace is doing here. She's drawing attention to more contentious issues of the Holocaust, or what I think maybe is, I don't even know if that one's contentious, Mengele sewing twins together. I thought that was like a well-established one, but the whole idea is just drawing attention to the more extreme things to try and muddy everything. Because if you go to an actual historian, when they talk about even survivor stories, Holocaust museums will talk about survivor stories, and even they will say, yeah, not all of it's reliable. Some witness statements, especially ones that appear later, are notoriously unreliable because people's memories just kind of get a bit fucked up. For example, let's compare Candace Owens and the way that she's representing people talking about the Holocaust of just believing every extreme thing without enough evidence, even though she used the worst example for it because she used one that's not even that controversial. Like the Mengele studies are so uncontroversial. Like everyone knows they happened. No one disagrees with that. If you look at the BBC talking about, say, for example, the twins of Auschwitz, what do we say here? Liberating the death camp, twin children, the subjects of experiments, people taken from their village. They talk about treading on people who were dead on the way there. Mengele looking for twins, perfect Aryan features, bringing people into his laboratory. Apparently, he was really nice to people as a way of coaxing them to come into the lab. One record saying that there were 732 pairs of twins, Roma twins. They're talking about the injections of bacteria, giving them diseases, an infection of the mouth or genitals, which causes boils and often turn gangrenous. Oh yeah, the dwarf and the Roma woman being made to have sex. But again, this is like a witness statement. Someone who's 9 years old. People living by numbers rather than names. Okay. Forgetting their identities. Filming. Some twins became feverish. He reacted angrily when twins went missing. Experimented on dwarves, giants, and Romas. People discovering people's identities. Death march. Murdered. Anti-Semitic riot. 46. Oh yeah, people don't know. A lot of people don't know this. You know that after the war, there was a pogrom in Poland, an anti-Semitic pogrom. I mean, even there though, this is like one article where, for every claim they have, they're telling you where they got each story from, right? They're saying, oh, one witness who was age 9 said they saw this, or like another claim, was in the journal, or even sometimes other guards testified to things, or they found this in a logbook. Like, they tell you where their evidence comes from. So if fucking Candace Owens is just sitting there like, oh, I don't know, that just sounds really strange to me. I can't believe a human being would engage in depravity every now and then. By the way, let's talk about Israel. No fucking, oh God. Yeah, it's so bizarre. But that's a really good example of just like one of the hallmarks of Holocaust denial is just like there's no curiosity involved in this line of reasoning of just saying, oh, there are some stories that just sound way too far-fetched. It's like, well, yeah, in every atrocity, there will be exaggerations. There will be people who have unreliable memories. There will be people who want to embellish things for propaganda purposes. There will be all of these kind of things. But again, if you want to actually learn about the Holocaust, if you go to Holocaust Museum websites or to the Wiener Library or to anything like that, Holocaust Encyclopedia website, they're going to be truthful. They're going to be pretty reliable. And especially since this is probably one of the most studied events in human history, if not the most, because everyone was so intent on trying to get the record as accurate as possible and trying to find out like how many people died or how did they die or like what were the directives given from the top down. Like, yeah, people wanted to know this. It was like a very important thing to get documented. So it's not like, and then obviously once historians start reporting on it, they do what historians always do, which is to try to correct each other, to try to actually each other, to try to have their own fucking credit. That's why you have debates among historians about the Holocaust. For a while, people weren't exactly sure how many Jews died. Some early estimates actually said 5 million. Some people, even whilst the war was happening, one person wrote 6 million. I guess maybe they just guessed it and got it right. I don't know. Some people said 5 million. Some other estimates found 7 million. And then eventually, it seemed to be that the kind of average, most reliable set of data was 6 million. So that's why they went with that one. Then people wanted to know like how many people died in each camp, and they were going with census data and Nazi documents because some of them survived. They didn't burn down all of them. Some people have debates about whether or not the Holocaust was planned from day one, from like 1919, when Hitler first wrote that he wished more Jews had died in World War I, and maybe the defeat would have been worth it. Or was it something that actually came out of a failure of Nazi policy to try and deport Jews that eventually culminated in them resolving to kill them because that was the only way they could get rid of them in 1941. So there's a whole debate there amongst historians to this day about whether or not the Holocaust started in 41 or did it start in 33 or did it actually start in 1919, right? So that's a thing as well. So you can have these debates about the Holocaust if you want. The problem is like you actually have to take an interest in the subject. There's so many ways that you can learn very basic things about Wannsee or about the way that they moved from using car exhausts onto a locked room to gas people in Chelmno and the way that eventually became Zyklon B. If you want to learn about why there's Zyklon B marks on the walls of the delousing chambers, but not of the gas chambers, because of the amounts they used and because of how often the chambers were used and because of how long it takes to air them out and because of the differences between how much Zyklon you need to kill a louse versus to kill a human. All this kind of shit. There are answers to all these things. If you want to know why there was a swimming pool in fucking Auschwitz, well, who used it? Okay, who was it for? Was it for the prisoners? Then you get to learn about the concentration camp and death camp complexes. Like, what's the difference between a concentration camp and a death camp? How many death camps were there? There were actually only 5. Some people used to say 6, but then they took the status away from one of them for some reason. When did Birkenau get added to the Auschwitz complex? How many people died in the gas chambers versus died in the camps versus died in the ghettos versus got murdered by gunshots? Why did they switch from bullets to gas? Yeah, like, you can learn about all these things. It's not difficult. You know what's a really good website? This one here, Holocaust Encyclopedia. Any particular issue, even Weimar Germany, you want to learn about it, just find an article here and it'll take you to it. If you want to search Article 48, perhaps one of the legal self-destruct buttons of the Weimar Republic. Article 48 that allowed the president to rule by decree in states of emergency and to suppress human rights. Obviously, massively abused by Hindenburg, and then also sets the precedent for the Enabling Act to Hitler. Yeah, just go here. Like, I don't know. Instead of being like, oh my God, someone did a murder in a bad way. That's crazy, chat. I can't believe it. It's funny. It's ironic as well because Candace Owens just has doesn't she just have the ultimate vibe of someone who like really loves true crime on Netflix? Like, I feel, oh God. The skin lampshade thing is from Buchenwald. The camp's commander's wife, it is alleged, did it. There's a debate on whether it's actually human skin, but it seems to be from the recent report. Yeah, because I think the recent report that spoke about, that seems to confirm that it was human skin, is actually very recent, which goes to show you again that people debate these things. People debate them. But the purpose for Candace Owens and other Holocaust-denying fucks is not to debate these things or to ask questions about them. It is to draw attention to the least reliable parts of the history and act as if the entire narrative is like that. That's it. That's the entire goal. It's like, this is the David Irving thing as well. And I think Holocaust deniers know this as well, because David Irving is probably one of the best examples of someone so blatantly doing it in a dishonest way. So long story short, David Irving, big Holocaust denier, American historian, calls him a Holocaust denier, says he's deliberately lying about the Holocaust. He sues her for defamation. It's British court, so because he's English, she has to prove in court that he lied, because that's how it works, and she succeeds. And part of David Irving's case was to take someone who gives tours of Auschwitz. And in the trial, there's a film about this, you can watch it as well, based on the transcripts from the trial. He takes this guy and asks him about this gas chamber and says, there's a blueprint here for this gas chamber, like a schematic, that shows you the holes in the ceiling where the cyanide pellets, the cyclone, was dropped down by the Nazis to kill people, to gas them, because it was pellets. And the guy says that this isn't really like a blueprint per se. This is an estimation of what the chamber would have looked like. There's no original document showing you about the exact construction of the chamber. So then David Irving says, well, so where's the proof that there were holes there? Can you see them on the remains of the gas chamber? Because it's in ruins. And he says, no. And then David Irving gets really excited and says, well, since there's no official Nazi document showing you that there would be holes with little shafts to drop the cyanide pellets down in this gas chamber, it cannot be a gas chamber. Then he goes and starts screaming, no holes, no Holocaust. And this becomes like the newspaper headline. Everyone's really excited that he gets his little W in the fucking debate and the trial. But again, there's a few problems with it. One is the gas chamber that they're talking about that they can't find the original holes in is literally in ruins. It's a pile of rubble because the gas chamber was dynamited by the Nazis before they evacuated to destroy the evidence. They dynamited it. So it's funny that they use that example and a lack of solid evidence to say that this can't be what it is. And throughout the trial, the historian, Richard Evans, decides to test David Irving on his theories on the more solid pieces of evidence, because not every gas chamber was dynamited. Some of them stayed. Some of them have the holes with the shafts. It's very clear. The orders for Zyklon B and the purpose of ordering them, the routine for like what time they would bring people in, to the reason that they made them to look like showers and all that shit. Like, that's all there. So he decides to ask David Irving his opinion on a different chamber in one of the other camps. Like, okay, can you explain this one? Because this one's more or less intact. We know, like, there's all these documents for saying what it was used for. And David Irving puts forward this theory that it was a delousing chamber. And Richard Evans says, well, that's a bit weird. Why is it that? Why is it a delousing chamber if it's like right next to another delousing chamber? It's next to another one. And that one that it's next to actually has the hallmarks of a delousing chamber because it's got all the stains in the walls, because they used a lot more Zyklon for delousing than they did for gassing. So then Irving says, well, actually it was more of an air raid shelter. You know, they converted it. And it's like, okay, it's an air raid shelter. Why is it like over a mile away from the building where the soldiers and the guards would be staying? Why would they have to run a mile to get into an air raid shelter? And then he fumbles it. Like, David Irving just completely fumbles it because, again, that's not his strong point. Like, people like him stay away from well-documented parts of the most clear-cut things, and they find the things about the Holocaust that they want to talk to are the ones that have holes in the evidence, that are not perfectly documented, because Nazis destroyed a lot of documents, they destroyed a lot of evidence. It's a war crime that was committed secretly, which means that documentation is never going to be perfect. So he just finds a collection of those things and then just sticks with it, or just fabricates quotes and translations or whatever. So, yeah. There's a movie called Denial, yes. Why would an air raid shelter lock from the outside? I think that was a question as well. I don't know. Do you think Irving actually believed any of the stuff he said? I honestly, to this day, have no idea. I can't understand that. I can't understand liars with that much conviction. I don't know. Because he's, like, David Irving is a Nazi, right? He's a supporter of Hitler. Like, he likes Hitler. He's not even shy about that. He's an admirer of Hitler. So, I don't know. But all the same, that's like a very clear tactic that they use. It's funny, though, because David Irving is obviously a lot more sophisticated than Candace Owens. So, he knows where the gaps are in the documentation. He knows where to focus on. Whereas Candace Owens is just like, Candace Owens is just saying, what? That sounds crazy. No way. And just stops there. Like, fuck me. Fucking moron.